Okay, so have you noticed, like, lately online, there's this trend you just can't escape?
Yeah. What's that?
For me, it's been these images popping up, like, everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Friends, meme accounts, even, like, I tried it myself just to see what would happen.
Hmm.
Everyone's, like, turning themselves into Studio Ghibli characters.
It's really taken off.
It really has.
Mhm.
It's all because of ChatGPT and their latest update,
Right.
and it's just completely, like, flooded social media.
It is. That very recognizable style that Studio Ghibli has, and then the fact that the technology makes it so easy to do, has just made it really, really popular. It's interesting to think about why that aesthetic is so popular, though, with so many people.
It really is, and I think for anyone who maybe hasn't spent their lives, watching these films, like I have Studio Ghibli. It's this legendary animation studio from
Yeah.
Japan.
Yeah.
They're the ones behind like Spirited Away and
Yeah.
My Neighbor Totoro.
Absolutely.
And they're just these visually stunning movies.
Mm.
They're all hand painted, and they just have this like incredible emotional pull.
They do.
And the man behind all of it is Hayao Miyazaki.
Yeah, and I think his films are not just visually stunning, as you said, but they also have this ability to connect with people on a really human level.
Mm-hmm.
His characters deal with some pretty complicated emotions. They live in these imaginative worlds, and he explores these themes that really stay with you even after the movie's over.
They really do, and that's part of the reason why this whole AI Ghibli trend, I think, has like stirred up such a strong reaction from people.
I think so too.
And that's kind of what we wanted to dive into a bit with you today.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I think what's kind of interesting is behind these kind of like beautiful and seemingly innocent pictures, there's this whole other layer. Miyazaki has some really strong feelings about AI art in general, and then there's also the surprising environmental impact that all of this is having.
Right.
So are you ready to like delve into all of this with us today?
I'm ready. I think it would be really helpful to start with Miyazaki's perspective because it really is at the heart of this conversation.
Yeah. So let's talk about Miyazaki.
Hmm.
Back in 2016, there was this NHK documentary, and they had this really interesting moment that they captured.
Okay.
So they showed him and his longtime collaborator at Studio Ghibli, this guy named Toshio Suzuki, an animation that had been created by AI.
Wow.
And now this wasn't just, some cute little soot sprite or something.
Right.
They described it as like a grotesque, nightmarish entity.
Oh, wow.
So imagine something that's like dragging itself along and it's moving in this like really unnatural way, almost using its head like it was a limb. And he was doing all of this with like no sense of pain or even any will to live. It sounds really unsettling.
It really does.
And Miyazaki's response was immediate. It was really like heartfelt, and he didn't hold back at all. He said, and I'm quoting this directly, "I strongly feel that this is an insult to life itself."
Wow. That's a really strong statement.
It is, and it wasn't just a dislike.
Yeah.
It was a condemnation, and it was coming from his artistic and personal values.
Absolutely.
And then this is where it gets really impactful, is when you think about Miyazaki and his journey
Yeah.
and what informs his art.
Okay.
Because he then went on to share this really personal story about why he felt this way.
Mm-hmm.
So he talked about a friend that he has who lives with a disability,
Okay.
and how for him, even doing things that we might take for granted, like giving a high five, is actually a really big struggle.
Right.
His friend's arm has trouble extending just because of his muscle stiffness. And so Miyazaki, reflecting on this, he was thinking about his friend's reality, and he just couldn't reconcile that with what he had seen, with this, lifeless suffering being that was in the animation. And so he said this incredibly powerful line, and this is a quote: "Whoever creates this stuff has no idea what pain is."
Wow. That's so powerful.
It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
For the listener, just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
How deeply personal this reaction is.
And it makes you think about this conversation in a completely different way.
Totally.
I mean, it takes his feelings about art and connects it to this deep understanding of just like the human experience, just
Yeah.
the fact that life is so fragile, but also resilient, and how pain and struggle are part of that. And it seems like for Miyazaki, this AI animation lacked that kind of empathy. It
Yeah.
was disconnected from what it really means to be alive and to feel. So this wasn't just about aesthetics. This was about something much deeper.
Totally. And, he didn't just stop there. He went on to say this, and it was almost prophetic. "I feel like we are nearing the end of times. we humans are losing faith in ourselves. So you can tell that his reaction, it goes way beyond just like being unsettled by this one animation. There's a fear there
Yeah.
that technology like this, which can mimic life without actually understanding it,
Yeah.
it undermines something core to our humanity and our ability to create art that is meaningful.
Absolutely. And it's kind of scary to think about where art and technology are headed.
It is. And, you know, it leads us to this kind of paradoxical situation we find ourselves in with this AI invasion, as some are calling it, into the art world. I read something that I thought was really ironic, and it was about people's reactions. When ChatGPT had that outage a little while ago,
Oh, yeah.
people were like freaking
I
out.
remember that.
I know. And it just shows how quickly we become reliant
Yeah.
on AI for even something as like simple as generating art in the style of someone like Miyazaki.
It's true.
I know. And it's like, well, hold on a second.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting to think about Miyazaki's work, which is so focused on people, and then think about the difference between just the technical side of art and what art really is, you know?
Yeah.
And AI can be trained on all these Ghibli films, and it can analyze things like symmetry and composition and color palettes, all those technical parts of creating something visually appealing.
Right.
But what makes Miyazaki's work so special is that he goes beyond just the technical stuff.
Yeah.
He can really infuse his films with genuine human emotion. He can capture these beautiful, fleeting moments and convey these complex feelings that you can't even put into words through animation. That comes from a really human place.
That's so true. And that really is the heart of the whole issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
People are arguing that, yeah, AI art can be technically impressive. It can even be beautiful.
Yeah,
But at its core, it just lacks that human element.
it's missing that, yeah.
You know, the imperfections that come from when an artist struggles, or, you know, the moments of like pure creativity that you just get when you're feeling some kind of emotion.
Right.
It doesn't have that essence of what it means to be alive and to feel, because it's not coming from a place of lived experience.
Exactly.
Not a place of, you know, joy or sorrow or that whole spectrum of human emotion that fuels artists like Miyazaki.
Yeah. The AI hasn't lived that.
No, it hasn't.
It hasn't felt those things.
And the AI itself, you know, when it responds to people, it even admits that it doesn't have lived experience.
Right.
That it doesn't have, you know, personal emotions or memories or intuition.
It doesn't have any of that.
It can analyze patterns and it can copy styles really well.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's just adjusting to what a user tells it to do.
Yeah.
It's taking all this data it's been trained on and it's spitting something out.
Right.
But it's not creating something that's truly original from its own feelings or understanding.
No, not at all.
Which brings us right back to Miyazaki's point.
Exactly.
If you take that human connection away from art, what's left? He calls it soulless algorithmic beauty.
Yeah.
Art without a spirit. Which, as we've talked about, he sees as an insult to life itself.
It's hard to disagree with that when you think about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, you know, we think about Studio Ghibli specifically. Miyazaki's reaction is even more understandable.
Yeah.
Their entire philosophy,
Yeah.
their artistic soul is rooted in this very, like, careful analog process.
It's so different from AI.
It really is. I mean, they are famous for their hand-painted animation.
Yeah.
They use very minimal digital assistance.
That's amazing.
Even today, when everything is like computer-generated.
Right.
There's actually a quote from Miyazaki where he said, "I believe that the tool of an animator is the pencil."
Wow.
Just that one sentence, it sums up their dedication to this human hands-on process.
Yeah.
It's about the artist having this direct connection between their hand and their vision and the final piece of art.
It's beautiful.
It really is.
And their films offer so much more than just like amazing visuals.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they blend these ordinary things with fantasy in this way that's just so unique.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of political stuff in there too, like a strong anti-war message, which makes sense when you know about Miyazaki's experiences growing up in Japan after World War II. These aren't just fantasy films.
Yeah.
They deal with real-world issues.
They really do. And the characters are so complex.
Yeah.
They go beyond just like good versus evil.
Right.
They're flawed.
Yeah.
They make mistakes. They have strengths.
Yeah.
And it just makes them feel so human and relatable.
Totally.
And then there's this theme that comes up in a lot of his films.
Okay.
And it's this idea of environmentalism.
Right.
Miyazaki's been very outspoken about how he feels about environmental destruction,
Yeah.
especially when it's driven by just wanting to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
And that concern for the natural world,
Yeah,
it really comes through in his films.
it does.
He's always exploring that relationship between humans and nature.
He is. And it really makes you think about your own relationship with nature.
It does. And, he's also known for how he portrays women in his films.
Yeah.
The women are always strong,
Yes.
independent,
Yeah.
and their stories are about them, like, finding themselves and growing.
Mm-hmm.
And it never feels like he's just trying to sexualize them or put them in a box.
That's so refreshing.
It really is. And all the articles we looked at pointed that out.
Yeah.
That's something that's still pretty rare,
Mm-hmm.
even in movies today.
It is.
So when you look at the critical acclaim that his films have received,
Mm-hmm.
it really speaks volumes about the impact that this kind of human-centered artistry has.
Yes.
It, Spirited Away winning an Academy Award.
Yeah.
That was huge.
It was.
And then more recently, The Boy and the Heron also won an Oscar.
That's right.
It just proves that this handcrafted,
Yeah.
emotionally resonant style of filmmaking,
Mm-hmm.
it has this lasting value and impact on people.
Absolutely.
So you can imagine when people see AI so easily copying this really distinctive Ghibli style,
Yeah.
it's totally understandable why they feel so disappointed.
It is. It feels like a letdown.
It does.
Yeah.
Some people have described it as like a gut punch.
Yeah.
Or even the ultimate heartbreak.
Yeah.
For artists who put so much of themselves into their work.
Yeah.
And for fans who connect so deeply with the human feeling in Miyazaki's films.
It's especially hard when you know how strongly he opposes AI art.
It is. It's almost adding insult to injury.
Yeah.
And then you have things like the CEO of OpenAI, this guy Sam Altman.
Right.
He changed his profile picture to a picture of himself
Yeah.
that was AI generated in the Ghibli style.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people felt like that was so insensitive.
It did feel that way.
Like it was just dismissing
Yeah.
all these concerns that artists and fans had.
It's like he wasn't taking their worries seriously.
Exactly. And OpenAI, they've tried to put some safeguards in place. So you can't just type in something like, I want a picture in the StudioGhibli style.
Oh, so they've restricted those kinds of prompts.
Yeah. But, the internet is the internet.
Right.
People are finding ways around those
Oh,
restrictions.
I bet. It's like a constant game of cat and mouse.
It really is. And
Yeah.
this leads to another concern, which is, what if this trend makes people think that AI-generated art is just good enough?
Yeah.
Compared to all the training and effort and emotion that a real artist puts into their work.
Right.
Like if you can just type a few words
Yeah.
and get a beautiful Ghibli-esque picture,
Mm-hmm.
will people still value the skills and passion of human artists?
That's a really good question.
There's this fear that this could actually devastate creative fields.
It's a valid concern. It makes you think about the future of creative jobs
Yeah.
and whether our society will continue to value human skills and originality.
It really does. Okay, so we've talked about Miyazaki's very personal and emotional response to AI art, and we've talked about how it could impact art as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another really important part of this AI, the Ghibli thing that we have to talk about,
What's that?
and it's the environmental cost.
Oh, right.
This whole trend might seem innocent and fun,
Yeah.
but it turns out it's leaving a pretty big footprint on the planet.
That's interesting.
It is.
I wouldn't have thought about that.
I know, and it was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah.
And honestly, a little bit sobering when we were looking into it.
So what did you find?
So generative AI,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it's making images,
Yeah.
it uses a ton of energy and computing power.
Okay.
We're not talking about just running an app on your phone.
Right.
This is happening in huge data centers
Yeah.
that are full of these processors that use a lot of electricity, and they're running all the time.
Oh.
We're looking at some research, and they had these crazy numbers.
Oh, wow.
Apparently, it takes something like 1 trillion floating point operations just to make one AI-generated image.
1 trillion.
1 trillion.
That's hard to even imagine.
I know. And just to put that in perspective,
Yeah.
that's about 10 times more than what it takes for a large language model
Yeah.
to give you a text response.
Oh, wow.
So for everyone listening, try to wrap your head around how big that number is.
It's massive.
It is. And most of this work
Yeah.
is being done by these things called GPUs, which are graphics processing units.
Okay.
They're really powerful.
Yeah.
They're made to handle these complex visuals, but they also use a lot of electricity.
Right.
Some of the more advanced ones can use over 700 watts
Mm-hmm.
just when they're running at full power.
Wow.
So when you think about it, There are thousands and thousands of these things in data centers all around the world,
Yeah.
all working at the same time to keep up with how many people want AI images.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to get a sense of just how much energy all of this is using.
Yeah, that's a lot of power.
It's a lot of power. And it's not just the processing power itself.
Okay.
The AI that makes these images, these things called diffusion models,
Yeah.
they have to go through all these steps to refine the image.
Right.
So they start with something that's basically just digital noise.
Okay.
And then over dozens or sometimes even hundreds of steps,
Wow.
they refine it until they get to the final image.
Oh, wow.
And each one of those steps needs a lot of computing power.
So that's even more energy.
It is. And there are estimates out there that say making just one AI picture using a diffusion model
Mm-hmm.
can use around 2.5 watt hours just for the computation.
Okay.
But then you have to add in the energy that it takes to cool the data centers
Yeah.
and all the other infrastructure stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that number jumps to 3.25 watt hours per image.
3.25.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so how much is that really? Can you give me a comparison?
Yeah. So did it give you an idea that's like running a 60-watt light bulb for about 3.25 minutes?
Okay.
Or it's like charging your smartphone to about 50%.
That's interesting.
I know, right? So if you think about it, one image on its own,
Yeah.
it might not seem like a lot,
Right.
but when you have millions of people all over the world
Yeah.
making all these images
Mm-hmm.
just for fun or to share online,
Yeah.
all those little bits of energy, they
Mm-hmm.
really start to add up.
They do.
And we saw that happen with this Ghibli trend.
Yeah.
It got so popular that OpenAI actually had to put limits on how many pictures people who were using the free version could make.
Oh, wow.
Even Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI,
Yeah.
he said publicly that it was putting so much strain on their systems.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was talking about how their GPUs were basically melting because they were working so hard
Yeah.
and that their teams were just exhausted trying to keep up with all the demand.
Yeah, it does sound pretty insane.
It does.
Yeah.
And that just gives you an idea of how big this is.
It really does. And you're saying something earlier about how much energy these data centers use.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like they're already a big part of how much electricity we use globally.
They are. Right now, they're using somewhere between 1 and 1.5%
Okay.
of all the electricity in the world.
Wow.
And it's only going to go up
Yeah.
as we use more and more AI.
It makes sense.
It does. And it's not just the electricity either.
Oh.
These data centers, they create so much heat
Mm-hmm.
that they need these crazy cooling systems just to make sure that the equipment doesn't break.
Wow.
Some of them use air conditioning or liquid cooling.
Okay.
But in some places where these big tech companies have their data centers,
Yeah.
like in Arizona or Utah,
Mm-hmm.
they actually use these systems that cool things down by evaporating water.
Oh, wow.
And those systems can use hundreds of thousands of gallons of water every single day.
That's a lot of water.
It is. And some people have even estimated that some of these really big data centers
Yeah.
could end up using tens of millions of gallons of fresh water every year.
That's crazy.
It is. And this is especially a problem in areas where there's already not enough water.
It is.
So whenever something like the AI Ghibli art trend happens
Mhm.
and it goes viral,
Mm.
it means that there's a sudden huge need for all this energy and infrastructure.
Right.
What starts out as one person just messing around with AI,
Yeah.
it quickly turns into something that's using a lot of resources
It does.
and has a real impact on the environment.
Yeah.
One image might not seem like much,
Right.
but when you have billions of them,
Yeah.
it makes a difference.
It does.
And the research we looked at, it said that the whole Ghibli aesthetic,
Yeah.
that cute, charming style,
Yeah.
it actually made the trend even bigger.
It makes sense.
People weren't just making one picture.
Right.
They were making tons of them,
Mm-hmm.
trying different things,
Yeah.
sharing them online,
Yeah.
and all of that engagement.
Yeah.
It just meant that even more processing power and energy were needed.
That makes sense.
It does, and it really shows how these trends that seem like they're just happening online,
Yeah.
they actually have real consequences in the physical world.
Yeah. I never thought about that.
Yeah, the cloud,
Yeah.
which seems so, intangible and virtual,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually this massive network of physical stuff like servers and data centers.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is still running on energy that's not renewable.
Yeah.
So all the things we do online,
Yeah.
whether it's watching videos
Mhm.
or, all the stuff with cryptocurrency,
Right.
and now this AI image generation,
Yeah.
it's all using energy from the real world,
It is.
and it's having an impact on the environment.
That's really interesting.
And here's the thing. even though companies like OpenAI
Mm-hmm.
and other AI providers are working on ways to make their systems more efficient,
Yeah.
and they're investing in renewable
Mm-hmm.
energy, the amount of energy that AI needs is growing so fast
Yeah.
that it's actually outpacing all those efforts.
Wow.
So it's a big challenge as we move forward.
Yeah, it is.
So what can we do? The research we looked at mentioned a few things.
Okay.
And one was that companies are trying to optimize their systems.
Yeah.
So they need less time to generate an image.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using newer processors that are more energy efficient.
That's good.
It is. But one of the articles made a really good point.
What's that?
It said that these are technical solutions to something that's also like a cultural problem.
Oh, interesting.
It's about how we as users
Mm-hmm.
choose to use these tools.
Right.
So the real challenge is making people more aware
Yeah.
and getting them to think about what they're doing.
Yeah.
AI image generation went from being this niche thing
Mm-hmm.
to something that everyone can use.
Right.
And we have to start thinking about it more carefully
Yeah.
and understanding that there's a cost to using it.
That makes sense.
One idea that came up in the research
Yeah.
was that maybe we should think about AI art tools as like a luxury
Okay.
instead of just a toy that we can use whenever we want without thinking about it.
Yeah.
Maybe that would make us use them less
Yeah.
in a more sustainable way.
That's interesting.
I also thought this was interesting.
Okay.
What if there was something like a label on each AI image?
Oh, wow.
It told you how much energy it took to make.
Like a food label.
Exactly like a nutrition label.
That's a cool idea.
I thought so too.
I like that.
It would make people think about the environmental impact of what they're doing.
Yeah.
It wouldn't just be clicking a button without thinking about
It
it.
would make it more real.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then there's this idea of slow content,
What's that?
which is kind of like slow fashion.
Oh, okay.
It's about being more thoughtful and intentional about what we create and what we consume.
That's a good idea.
So maybe we don't need to make a million AI images.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be more mindful about it.
I think so too.
So we started out talking about these beautiful AI-generated Ghibli images,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no denying that they can be really captivating.
Yeah.
They tap into our love for Miyazaki's work.
They do.
But what we've learned in this deep dive is that behind each one of these images
Yeah.
is this massive system
Right.
that uses a lot of power and energy.
It's not just a click of a button.
It's not.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing to remember is that even though these pictures only exist digitally,
Mm-hmm.
their impact on both art and the environment,
Yeah.
it's very real.
It is.
It makes you think about all the choices we make online
Yeah.
and how they're shaping the world.
They really are.
It's something to consider.
It is.
It's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we're talking about the future of art and the future of our planet.
We are.
How do we find a balance between the exciting things technology can do
Mm-hmm.
and being responsible about how we use it?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive today.
Thanks for having me.
It's been really interesting.
It has.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive. Sounds good.